Wake of the Bellerophon by T.B. Dahl. Chapter 13. William's Advancement. After the glorious 1st of June, HMS Bellerophon returned to Portsmouth with victory in her wake and ruin in her bones. The newspapers preferred the first. The dockyard received the second. She came in scarred, patched, smoke-stained, jury-rigged, and proud enough to make damage look temporary. 5 captured French ships came with the fleet, prizes under British colours, their tricolours lowered, their decks bearing the same evidence that victory was not particular about nationality when distributing splinters. For 6 weeks, Bellerophon sat in dockyard hands. Shipwrights swarmed over her hull like ants with adzes. Caulkers drove oakum into seams. Riggers replaced standing and running rigging, tarred shrouds, spliced lines, and sent new spars aloft. Carpenters cut away splintered timber. Gunners' crews inspected damaged carriages and exchanged cracked trucks. The whole ship rang from morning until dusk with hammering, sawing, hauling, shouting, scraping, and the dockyard's particular genius for making repair sound like demolition. The midshipmen were billeted ashore in lodging houses near the yard. This was called comfort by men who had not seen the lodging houses. Thomas shared a room with Farley, Clark, and Morris, above a cooper's widow who disapproved of naval youth in general, but accepted naval coin specifically. The bed was narrow, the floor uneven, and the room smelled of damp plaster, stale pipe smoke, and boiled cabbage from below. Compared with the berth, it was spacious. Compared with Greystone House, it was a legal insult. Thomas spent his days studying navigation and assisting Lieutenant Ballard with inventories, replacement stores, and the 1,000 small accountings by which a ship returned from battle became, slowly and expensively, a ship again. One afternoon they stood in a dockyard storehouse checking delivered rope against a requisition list. Coils lay stacked in great hemp-smelling heaps. Dust floated in shafts of light. Somewhere outside, a foreman shouted that no one had ordered that quantity of tree nails, which meant either he had, someone else had, or the Admiralty had invented them for sport. Ballard ran a hand over a coil. 3-inch hawser laid. Mark it. Thomas checked the tally. Correct, sir. Next. 2 coils of 2.5-inch tarred. Should be 4. Ballard looked. So it should. He made a notation. You have a good eye for detail, Oxenham. Thank you, sir. Most midshipmen would be halfway to a tavern by now. Seems a waste to drink when there is work to be done. Ballard glanced at him. That answer would make you popular with no one in Portsmouth. Thomas hid a smile. Ballard finished the notation, then folded a small paper and held it out. News. Prize money allocation for Vengeurs du Peuple. Thomas looked up sharply. Already, sir. The Admiralty is occasionally swift when morale can be improved by coin. Do not expect the habit to become general. Thomas unfolded the paper. £14, 6 shillings. The figures sat in ink with impossible weight. He had never possessed anything like it. Not a fortune, Ballard said, but a respectable sum for a first action. Thomas stared at the paper. £14, 6 shillings. Enough for instruments, books, clothing, gifts, savings. Enough to be foolish. Enough to be useful. What will you do with it? Ballard asked. Thomas answered slowly. Send some home to my mother, save the rest. Ballard nodded. Wise, though, allow yourself one small indulgence. Tradition is not always vice. That evening Thomas took himself to the George Inn and ordered a proper dinner, roast beef, fresh vegetables, bread that had not been baked with the structural ambitions of stone, a half-pint of ale. He ate slowly, astonished that turnips could possess flavour when not boiled into surrender. Around him, officers, clerks, pursers, merchants, and dockyard contractors talked of repairs, convoy, prize courts, promotions, Admiralty delays, French movements, and whether the cook had oversalted the mutton. It was the first meal since the battle that did not taste of smoke. The rest of the prize money went into William's secret drawer. Thomas opened the hidden catch at the back of his sea chest, wrapped the coin in oilskin, and placed it beneath the loose panel. The mechanism moved perfectly. No casual search would find it. No careless birthmate would guess. William's craft guarded Thomas's first earnings from war. That seemed fitting. Bellerophon returned to service in late July. Freshly repaired, re-rigged, re-armed, repainted where required, and no less formidable for having been broken and mended, she sailed again to join the Channel Fleet off Ushant. The sea took her back without ceremony. The sea was not sentimental about repairs. Thomas found that his place in the midshipman's berth had changed, not into ease. Ease remained a sure word, but the looks had altered. Stabbing Tom had survived the battle, saved Milford, worked well under fire, and proved useful over a slate. This last accomplishment mattered more than romance suggested. In the Navy, mathematics could feed a man's ambition more reliably than bravery, because bravery was plentiful until counted afterward. One morning, after Thomas came off watch, Milford called from the forecastle. "Oxenham." Thomas paused. "Yes." "Join me. I could use your assistance." Farley nearby lifted both brows. Thomas followed Milford forward. A chart lay spread across a sea chest, weighted by a knife, dividers, and a tin cup. Milford's manner was brisk, but not hostile. "Captain Hope wants our position worked with particular accuracy. Your calculation yesterday was sound." Thomas waited. Milford's jaw tightened. Mine was less so. This confession appeared to pain him less than expected, but more than illness. Thomas said, "I am happy to help." Milford looked at him sharply, as if searching for condescension. Finding none, he pointed to the chart. They worked together, morning sun sights, estimated leeway. Course steered, log distance, current allowed. Thomas demonstrated the calculation step by step. Milford asked intelligent questions. He understood the principles. It was the numerical machinery that sometimes betrayed him. Numbers, unlike men, did not become obedient when glared at. When they finished, Milford checked the result against his own rough working. "You have a gift for it," he said. Thomas shrugged. "My father taught me early." "He taught you more than method. Most of us use the formula as if it were a charm. Say the words, hope the ship appears on paper. You understand why it works." Thomas looked out over the bowsprit toward the Atlantic. "A good navigator is worth his weight in gold, my father says." "He is not wrong." Milford rolled the chart carefully, then, without looking at Thomas, said, "I should thank you." "For the calculation?" Milford's mouth twitched. "For the Frenchman." Thomas's ears warmed. It was the moment. "It was my life." Thomas said nothing. Milford extended his hand. "I misjudged you, Oxenham. You are a credit to the service." Thomas took the hand. Milford's grip was firm. "Thank you, Mr. Milford." From that day, something like friendship began between them. Not Farley's easy companionship, not William's lifelong certainty. Something more angular. Milford taught Thomas practical seamanship, berth politics, how to read a lieutenant's temper from 30 feet, which warrant officers could be approached before breakfast, which could not safely be approached before death, how to phrase a request so it sounded like obedience, and how not to lose dignity when seasick men vomited into one's shoes. Thomas taught Milford navigation, not by showing superiority, by making the numbers less treacherous. It was an odd bargain, but genuine. Battle had begun it. Usefulness sustained it. Summer passed in patrol duty, convoy escort, and long grey weeks watching the French fleet in Brest. Routine returned, though routine at war was merely danger walking slowly. Bellerophon shadowed, signalled, chased, turned back, escorted merchantmen through the western approaches, and stood off an enemy coast where every sail might be a prize, a trap, a neutral, or a fishing boat owned by a man who wished only that admirals would bother someone else. Thomas's navigation improved steadily. Captain Hope noticed. More than once he summoned Thomas to the quarterdeck to verify a position or assist with an intercept calculation. On one clear afternoon, after Thomas completed a course estimate against wind and tide, Hope examined the slate and nodded. "Your father would be proud." Thomas lowered his eyes. "Thank you, sir. You have the makings of a fine sailing master one day, if you choose that path." Thomas looked up quickly. "I hope to command my own ship, sir." Hope smiled. "Ambitious." Thomas wondered if he had spoken too boldly. Hope added, "Good. Never lose the fire. Only learn where to put it." In September, news came that Lieutenant Ballard had been promoted commander and given a sloop. The whole ship seemed pleased, which told Thomas more than formal congratulations could have done. Sailors did not rejoice sincerely for fools raised over them. They might cheer, they might drink. They did not mean it. Ballard found Thomas near the quarterdeck before departing. "I have recommended you to Lieutenant Morris, who will take my place." "Yes, sir." "He is sound, stricter than I am." Thomas looked at him. Ballard's mouth gave the smallest flicker. "Yes, I am aware of what that suggests. Mind you, do not disappoint him." "I will try not to, sir." "No. Do not try. Attend. Trying is what boys say before failing with clean consciences." Thomas nodded. Ballard placed his good hand on Thomas's shoulder. "Keep a weather eye out, Oxenham. I expect great things." The words were not grand. That made them worse. Thomas swallowed. "Thank you for everything you have taught me." Ballard held his gaze a moment. "Most of it you have yet to learn." Then he left. Plus, autumn deepened into winter. The Channel gales came hard, cold, and ill-tempered, rolling in from the west with rain like thrown gravel and wind that pressed Bellerophon onto her side, until guns, men, tables, plates, tempers, and theological certainty shifted together. Thomas learned to sleep wet, write with frozen fingers, eat while braced, climb while the mast whipped, and distinguish between ordinary misery and danger requiring report. He wrote home whenever possible. The letters were carefully edited. He sent portions of pay and prize money to Anne and Eliza, described dolphins, sunsets, signals, strange ships, and the majesty of Bellerophon under full sail. He omitted the lice, the black water sloshing in the bilge after storms, the cold, the scurvy cases on another ship, the boy who lost 2 fingers in a block, the nightmares, and the way his own hands sometimes remembered the Frenchman before his mind did. A letter could not carry everything, nor should it. In Newton Ferrers, life continued with the quiet arrogance of land. Apples ripened, cider was pressed, fields were ploughed for winter wheat, hedges were cut, roofs leaked, cows calved, without consulting international politics. Greystone House went on under Anne's management, which meant it did so efficiently, while pretending not to depend on her as much as it did. William Rowe continued his apprenticeship at the smithy. His hands grew larger, harder, more precise. His shoulders thickened, his eyes sharpened. He could judge heat by color now. Dull red, cherry, orange, yellow, too far. He learned when iron was ready and when it was merely pretending. He learned tempering, welding, shaping, fitting, and the endless truth that no joint was stronger than its weakest thought. On half days, he often found his way to Greystone House. He repaired a hinge on the stable door, mended a broken latch, split firewood, checked the well chain, reset a loose stone near the yard. Once, after a storm tore slates from the roof, he climbed up in bitter wind and fixed them while Anne stood below, pretending not to worry and failing only to those who knew her well. "You are too kind, William," Anne said one afternoon, as he stacked firewood as a crowd by the kitchen door. William wiped sweat from his brow with his sleeve. No imposition, ma'am. It is your free time. I promised Tom I would look after things while he was away. Anne's expression softened. Then at least take tea. Eliza has just taken a loaf from the oven. William hesitated, then entered. He always hesitated now. The kitchen was warm. Eliza stood at the table setting cups. She was older each time William looked, though he could not say how that happened between visits. Her dark hair escaped its pins. Her sleeves were rolled. Ink marked one finger. She had Anne's fine features and James's determined chin, which made her look capable of arguing with weather and expecting an answer. "William," she said. Perfect timing. William immediately suspected a task. "I have been struggling with this problem all morning." She pointed to a mathematics book open on the table. William stepped back, half a pace. "I am no scholar, Miss Eliza." Eliza looked at him as if he had said the moon was made of turnips. "Nonsense. Thomas wrote that you have a fine head for numbers. How else do you calculate measurements at the forge?" "That is different. It is not different merely because it is useful." William had no reply. She drew him to the table. The problem concerned volume, a cistern, dimensions given, capacity to be calculated. William bent over it, brow furrowed. After a moment, his face changed. "It is like casting." Eliza leaned closer. "When we cast a bell or a fitting, we must know how much metal to melt. Too little, and the mould fails. Too much, and Jenkins curses economy, which is his preferred religion." Eliza laughed. William picked up the pencil and worked slowly through the calculation, explaining as he went. His figures were not elegant, but they were right. Eliza watched with bright attention. "You make it practical." "It is practical. Mr. Makepeace never says that. He says we must learn because education refines the mind." William snorted before caution could stop him. Old Makepeace has never made anything useful in his life. Then he froze. "Beg pardon, Miss Eliza." Eliza's eyes danced. "You may call me Eliza. We have known one another since we were children." That was different. Everything seems to be different when people want to be difficult. William looked down at the page. "Yes. Eliza." The name changed the room, though nothing moved. This became pattern. William helped at Greystone House. Eliza helped him with mathematics, writing, geography, and the rough edges of speech that marked him as rural and working. He did not lose his Devon voice entirely. Eliza said she would not forgive him if he did. But he learned when to soften it, when to choose a cleaner phrase, when to speak to a customer with confidence rather than apology. In return, William brought the forge to her. He taught her how metal changed color under heat, why iron could be shaped hot but cracked if forced cold, how grain ran through wood, how to judge a tool's balance in the hand, how hinges failed, why a gate sagged, why a nail bent, how simple machines made heavy work tolerable. Eliza absorbed all of it. Anne watched, at first with amusement, then with attention, then occasionally with a stillness of her own. William was respectable, industrious, honest, promising. He would likely become a master smith one day. Perhaps more if war and trade kept Navy custom flowing. But there remained a gap between a tradesman and a post-captain's daughter, and society enjoyed gaps. It guarded them as if falling into one were a moral failure rather than a matter of birth. "They are friends," Anne told herself one evening, watching Eliza and William bent over a book. Nothing more. The phrase behaved poorly. It returned often and never grew more convincing. In January 1795, James Oxenham returned briefly before taking up his new command. HMS Lively, a 32-gun frigate, newly commissioned for the Western Squadron. "Fast and weatherly," James said over dinner. We shall hunt French commerce raiders along the Spanish and Portuguese coasts. Eliza set down her fork. Is it dangerous? James smiled with care. All service at sea carries risk. This answer satisfied no one, but maintained naval tradition. Lively is well armed, he continued, and has a good crew. We shall give any Frenchman cause to regret industry. Anne said nothing. 18 years of marriage to a naval officer had taught her that fear could be folded into napkins, hidden beneath accounts, stitched into shirts, and still be waiting at the door when orders came. James turned to her. My pay will be sent through Coots in Plymouth. Toulon prize money is deposited. You should have enough to manage comfortably. Anne nodded. Comfortably, like safely, was a word naval families used with caution. Later that evening, James found William leaving the stable after seeing to a loose horseshoe, young roe. William turned and wiped his hands on his apron. Yes, sir. A word. William approached. He stood straighter than he once would have. James noticed. My wife tells me you have been a great help during my absence. Happy to be of service, sir. That is not the same as nothing. William held his silence. James studied him. The powerful shoulders, the forge-hardened hands, the careful clothes, the face still young but steadier than before. I understand you spend considerable time with my daughter. William swallowed. Yes, sir. In what manner? We study, sir. Miss Eliza has been helping me with mathematics, writing, and speech. It helps with the business. And you help her? When I can. Practical things. James's face gave nothing. What does Mr. Jenkins think of these educational pursuits? He encourages them, says a craftsman who can speak to gentlemen as equals need not stand waiting for crumbs. The words escaped before William could soften them. He flushed. James's eyes sharpened, but not with anger. Does he, indeed? Yes, sir. And your prospects? William lifted his chin. I have taken on more responsibility. Mr. Jenkins says I may make Master Smith before 25 if I keep to it. A respectable trade. William met his eye. Yes, sir. There was a pause. Then James said, I sail in 3 days. While I am gone, continue looking in on my wife and daughter. The steward handles estate matters, but I prefer trustworthy eyes nearby. William's shoulders eased by a fraction. You have my word, sir. They will want for nothing I can provide. James placed a hand on his shoulder. Good man. William stood very still under the weight of that approval. 3 days later, James departed for Plymouth Dock. Anne, Eliza, and William stood at the lane end as the carriage took him away. The wheels turned. The horse's breath steamed. James lifted one hand. Then the bend took him. He will be all right, William said, because someone had to make a sentence stand where certainty could not. Father knows his business, Eliza said. Anne squeezed her daughter's hand. Of course he does. Then she turned toward the house. I believe there are currant buns fresh from the oven. William, you will join us? Gladly, ma'am. The winter was harsh. Bitter winds swept up the estuary and found every weakness in shutter, door, wall, and human spirit. Snow lay thick on fields. The pond froze at the edges. Smoke from cottage chimneys went sideways. Men broke ice in troughs. Animals stood with heads down and endured, because animals possess wisdom about weather that humans replace with complaint. William came twice a week when work allowed. He brought coal once when the delivery cart stuck in ruts near Yelpton. He split wood until his hands cracked. He tightened window fastenings. He patched a leak over the dairy. He carried heavy things Anne should not have lifted, and Eliza insisted she could. His visits often met Eliza's study hours. Gradually, the exchange between them changed. Eliza no longer simply taught. William no longer simply learned. They argued, they tested ideas, they corrected one another, they filled a notebook. At first, it was William's notebook of forge observations, begun because Eliza insisted useful knowledge deserved to be written before forgetful men buried it under habit. Different metals expand differently under heat. quenching temperature affects brittleness. A hinge fails more often by poor alignment than poor iron. Charcoal quality changes heat. A tool handle must answer the hand, not the eye. Eliza helped shape the sentences. William supplied the work. "You should make this a manual," she said one February afternoon. William laughed. Who would read a book by a blacksmith's apprentice? Other apprentices. They prefer being shouted at by masters. Then masters. They prefer shouting. Then write it for yourself first, and let the world catch up. William looked at her. Outside, rain struck the windows. Inside, Eliza's face was bright with conviction. "You speak as if the world takes instruction from you," he said. "It does not yet." William laughed, and the sound warmed the kitchen more than the fire had managed. Under Eliza's encouragement, his handwriting improved. His thoughts sharpened on paper. His speech altered too, not becoming false, but becoming more capable of travelling between rooms. He could speak to a farmer about a ploughshare, to Jenkins about tempering, and increasingly to a gentleman about design without shrinking. This proved useful when Lord Revelstoke came to the smithy to commission new gates. Jenkins expected to speak. William ended up doing half of it. He discussed hinge strain, decorative scroll work, weather exposure, iron thickness, and the cost of adding unnecessary flourishes requested by men with more land than taste. He did not say that last part aloud. Eliza's lessons had not been wasted. Afterward, Jenkins delivered a repaired kettle to Greystone House and found Anne in the kitchen. "The boy's a natural," Jenkins said. "Got the touch of a master smith already. Now he can talk to quality as if he was born to it. I may make him partner when his apprenticeship ends." Anne smiled. "Eliza will be pleased. She takes pride in his progress." Jenkins's weathered face creased. "Does she now?" Anne's smile faded. "They are friends, Mr. Jenkins." "Of course. Nothing more." Jenkins touched his forelock. "If you say so, ma'am, though I know a look when I see one. My Meg looked at me so before she decided I needed improving." After he left, Anne stood at the window while rain swept across the estuary. James at sea, Thomas at sea, Eliza at the table reading William's notebook with a pencil in hand, and more tenderness than grammar required. "The world is changing too quickly," Anne murmured. The house, being old, made no reply. In spring 1795, HMS Bellerophon patrolled the Bay of Biscay with Admiral Cornwallis's squadron. Thomas had grown over the winter. He was taller, broader, leaner, and weathered beyond his years. Salt, wind, work, study, and danger had put edges where softness had been. He was 13, though from a distance, and in poor light the sea had managed to make him appear almost older. The illusion ended whenever he was very hungry or very tired. His place in the berth was secure now. Newer boys looked to him for guidance, just as he had looked to Farley. This made him careful. Nothing reveals one's ignorance like being mistaken for an authority. In April, Captain Hope was reassigned, and Captain James Cranstoun, Lord Cranstoun, took command of Bellerophon. Cranstoun was experienced, strict, and fair, which meant no one aboard could rely on either charm or misery to escape duty. He moved through the ship quietly, asked unexpected questions, inspected without theatrics, and developed within 3 days an alarming knowledge of every officer's weakness. One morning, as Thomas came off watch, Cranstoun called him. "Oxenham." Thomas approached. "Sir, Mr. Milford speaks highly of your navigation." Thomas kept his face still. This was unexpected enough to be suspicious. Cranstoun continued. "He says you have an intuitive grasp of mathematics." "I enjoy the work, sir." "Enjoyment is not required. Accuracy is." "Yes, sir." Cranstoun's mouth softened slightly. "I have a task that may suit you. Our coastal charts in this section are inadequate, outdated in places, vague in others, and optimistic where optimism has sunk ships. You will assist the master in improving them from observation." Thomas's heart lifted. "I would be honoured, sir." "It is not an honour, Mr. Oxenham. It is work, detailed, painstaking work, requiring precision, patience, and the humility to admit when the coast refuses your line." "Yes, sir." "It may save lives later. Report to Mr. Sullivan at 8 bells." Thomas did. For weeks he worked with the sailing master, Mr. Sullivan, taking bearings, plotting coastlines, noting soundings, currents, hazards, landmarks, headlands, shoals, and the lies told by older charts. Bellerophon patrolled off Brest, and Thomas learned that coastline was not a line at all. It was teeth, mud, tide, rock, shadow, current, and memory. And a chart was only as good as the men honest enough to improve it. The work satisfied something deep in him. It made knowledge useful. It turned observation into safety. It belonged to command, but without noise. In June, west of Ushant, the lookout called down, "Deck there! Multiple sail bearing south-southeast." The ship altered instantly. Cranstoun came on deck with his telescope. He studied the horizon for several long minutes. No one disturbed him. Then he lowered the glass. "Signal the squadron. Enemy fleet sighted." Flags rose rapidly. Thomas, below with charts, felt the ship change through his feet before he heard the full news. Men ran. Drums did not yet beat, but anticipation did. He reached the quarterdeck to find Milford on duty, face tight. "What is it?" "French fleet, big one." "How many?" "Enough." Cranstoun conferred with his officers. "Gentlemen," he said, "we face a superior force. 12 of the line at least, likely more. Admiral Cornwallis orders retreat in good order toward the Channel Fleet, estimated 60 miles northwest." The word retreat did not sit comfortably on a British quarterdeck. Cranstoun spoke it as if it were a tool, not a shame. "We maintain a tight line. Mars is slowest and will lead. The rest match her speed and prevent her being cut off. Understood?" "Aye, sir." The chase began. 5 British ships northwest, a French fleet spreading behind them, eager, numerous, and unreasonably persistent. All afternoon the distance changed by degrees, each degree noticed by every eye aboard. The French gained. Their fastest ships drew ahead, reaching for Mars like wolves for the hindmost sheep. By mid-afternoon, the first lieutenant reported, "They will have Mars within range inside the hour." Cranstoun watched through his glass, signaled the squadron, reverse course to support Mars. Flags flew. The British ships turned with disciplined precision and stood back toward the French vanguard. "Beat to quarters," Cranstoun ordered. "Clear for action." The drums rolled. Bellerophon stripped herself for battle. Men to guns, marines to stations, powder to passing scuttles, sand on decks, hammocks tight in nettings. Thomas took station on the quarterdeck, ready to carry orders or fill whatever gap battle tore open. The leading French ships, seeing the British reverse to fight, checked their pursuit. That hesitation gave Mars time. Sometimes courage was not charging. Sometimes courage was refusing to abandon the slowest ship. Evening drew nearer. The French fleet still gained. The master reported quietly, "At this speed, sir, they overtake before we reach the Channel Fleet." Cranstoun nodded. "Then we must convince them not to overtake us." He turned to the signal lieutenant. "Make to Phaeton. Make sail ahead and signal presence of fleet. Then prepare false signals as if communicating with a larger force beyond the horizon." The officers exchanged glances. Understanding came. The frigate HMS Phaeton raced ahead, canvas piled on canvas, soon vanishing toward the northwest. Behind her, Cornwallis's squadron began hoisting complex signals into apparently empty air. To anyone watching from the French line, it might appear that British ships beyond the horizon were receiving orders, or that a larger fleet waited, or that Admiral Cornwallis had lost his senses. War rewarded the first 2 interpretations more than the third. The French pursuit faltered. Cranstoun watched. Now strengthen the illusion. Helm, bring us about. We engage their vanguard. Bellerophon turned. Gun ports open, colours flying. The rest followed. 5 British ships presented themselves against a superior force with the calm insolence of men expecting reinforcements. The French admiral hesitated. This was the crack Cranstoun had played for. No admiral wished to chase 5 ships into the mouth of 25, especially not if flags suggested the mouth was opening just beyond sight. The French began to haul away. Their leading ships slowed. Then the line altered. By nightfall, pursuit was abandoned. Cornwallis's squadron continued northwest and joined the Channel Fleet the following day. The ship exhaled only after the enemy disappeared. "A masterful bluff, sir," the first lieutenant said. Cranstoun's eyes remained on the horizon. "Sometimes, Mr. Morris, the suggestion of strength is as useful as strength, provided the enemy supplies the imagination." The maneuver would become celebrated as the Cornwallis retreat. Retreat was a poor word for it. It had been a lesson in nerve discipline, loyalty to a slower ship, and the theatre of command. Thomas recorded it carefully in his journal, noting every signal, alteration, and consequence. Milford read over his shoulder later. "A clever piece of theatre. Yes. Makes you wonder how often we have been fooled in similar fashion." Thomas looked at him. "Does it?" Milford smiled. "A little suspicion improves an officer. The French thought the risk too great." "Cranstoun knew what fear to offer them," Milford said. "That is captaincy." Below, the purser broke out an extra ration of grog. Even midshipmen were invited to feel grateful. Summer continued with patrols, coastal chases, signals, chart work, occasional skirmishes with French vessels that fled into shoal water, and the endless work of war at sea when no grand battle presented itself for history's convenience. In August, a letter reached Bellerophon after being forwarded from port to port, until it looked as travelled as any sailor aboard. Thomas opened it in the berth beneath the lantern. His mother's hand. "Dear Thomas, I hope this finds you well and in good spirits. We are all in good health here at Greystone House. Your father has taken command of HMS Lively and sailed in January. We have had 2 letters from him since, reporting all well. William Rowe continues to advance in his trade and has become a frequent visitor to our home. He has been most helpful in maintaining the property in your father's absence. I believe you would be impressed by his progress, both in his craft and in his education. Your sister has taken it upon herself to improve his mathematics and language, and he has proven an apt pupil. The orchard promises a good harvest this year, and we have put by preserves for when you next visit. Eliza has grown another inch and complains that her dresses must all be let out. She misses you terribly and asks me to include the enclosed note. Be safe, my dear son, and know that you are in our prayers daily. Your loving mother, Anne Oxenham." Thomas unfolded the second sheet. Eliza's hand was neat, firmer than before. "Dear Tom, Mother has told you about William's visits and our studies together. What she has not said is how much I enjoy his company. He has a keen mind and sees the world in such practical ways. I think I have learned as much from him as he has from me. We often talk about you and your adventures. William has constructed a small telescope from brass fittings, and we use it to look out to sea, pretending we might catch sight of your ship on the horizon. I have been reading everything I can find about naval engagements and navigation. Father left several books, and I have nearly worn them out. When you return, you must teach me how you find your way across the empty ocean using only stars and figures. Write when you can. Even a few lines would mean the world to us. Your sister, Eliza." Thomas read the letters twice, then a third time. Around him the berth continued its usual life. Clark cursed a torn cuff. Morris argued that biscuit tasted better if one stopped expecting food. Milford and Farley disputed a bearing. Someone laughed, someone coughed. The lantern swung. Home had moved while Thomas was away, not betrayed him, moved. Eliza no longer belonged only to the parlour, the spinet and childhood questions. William no longer belonged only to pond, forge, and old friendship. They had met in the space Thomas had left behind, and begun building something neither letter named directly. Thomas folded the pages and tucked them into his journal. That night he opened his writing desk and began a reply. "Dear Mother," he wrote, "of Bellerophon under Captain Cranstoun, of chart work off Brest, of the Cornwallis retreat, carefully described as a triumph of seamanship and judgment rather than a retreat from overwhelming force, though the distinction depended on which direction one looked. He wrote of Milford becoming a friend, of Mr. Ballard's promotion, of dolphins racing alongside the ship one morning in clear weather, of a sunset that turned the sea to molten copper, of stars so bright above the Bay of Biscay that a man could almost believe heaven had left its instruments out for navigators. He did not write of fear in a gale, or the French fleet gaining astern, or the feeling aboard when Mars nearly became sacrificed to speed. At the end, he added, 'Give my regards to William. Tell him I am glad he looks after you all, and that I look forward to seeing what his hands have made when next I am home. Tell Eliza I will teach her what navigation I can, though she must first promise not to outcalculate me before supper.' He sealed the letter for the next mail packet. Then he sat a moment longer, hand resting on the folded packet. Homesickness and satisfaction sat together in him, neither willing to give way. The boy who had once made a pond into an ocean was becoming a man on the ocean. At home, others were making their own passages. Outside, Bellerophon moved through the night under taut canvas, the water hissing along her hull. Above, the stars burned steady and indifferent, waiting to be read. Thomas lifted his head and listened to the ship. Whatever came next, it was already underway.
The story continues in the next chapter, so make sure to subscribe, leave a comment with your thoughts, and share this video with fellow book lovers.